Welcome to the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward, and with me as always for this very special bonus episode of the show, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Howdy.
So, hey, this is, in fact, a bonus episode of the show. This week, we are looking at an episode of Batman the Animated Series called The Cape and Cowl Conspiracy. If this plot sort of seems familiar to anyone, that's because it is actually ripped straight from the comics. That's when Batman actually starred in The Cape and Cowl Death Trap. Don't worry, Dre, it's before your time. We're talking 1975. But what's cool is this episode was written by Elliot Maggin, who is actually the guy who wrote the comics. So if you're going to adapt a story, get the guy who wrote the story to adapt it. And I was surprised to find out that a number of people aren't necessarily fans of this episode. But I've got to say, I think if there's an episode that sort of condemns Batman's mental stability, this might be it. Despite the fact that we've seen him in dreams, we've seen him with a straitjacket on, this episode raises a lot of logic questions regarding Batman and his motives.
And of course, I am here to defend Batman's decision-making.
Right. I'm not so sure. I think a psychologist is supposed to be straight down the line. You're supposed to be unbiased. But
I'm definitely as neutral as possible. But,
Right.
Remember, I bring in the psychological science, the clinical judgment, the background, the research information, everything that allows me to determine that Batman is doing just fine.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that's exactly what this show is. An analysis of Batman the Animated Series through the eyes of someone who thinks Batman is just fine. However, I think this episode, above all others, are going to prove Batman fanatic. Maybe even antisocial personality disorder. I don't know. I'll stick with fanatic. I'll go with that. We're going to start out the episode. We're talking about the villain this week, Josiah Wormwood.
The interrogator.
We find out why he's called the interrogator when we see that he has been hired to find someone and get information out of them. He's a courier who is supposed to be delivering bearer bonds. In fact, $750,000 worth of bearer bonds. And he ends up giving him a riddle or some sort of clue.
Where tracks and golf balls roll and wind, round-colored banners of all kind. Here new instructions you will find.
That leads this courier into what is essentially quicksand. And he is given the opportunity to save his own life if he's willing to tell where the bearer bonds are. What's interesting here is that Wormwood, to me, is sort of set up to almost be Edward Nygma. He's very Riddler-esque.
I think he's like the poor man's Riddler.
He's kind of the poor man's Riddler, but what's interesting about that is we're now, 31 episodes into Batman the Animated Series, 31, 32 episodes into Batman the Animated Series, and we've not seen the Riddler yet, but we're introduced to Josiah Wormwood.
All right, I'll tell you.
Good call.
Josiah gets a hold of the bearer bonds, and this really upsets Gordon, the police, and of course, Batman. Batman takes it on and decides he's going to find out from Wormwood where he has hidden the bearer bonds.
Right now, though, we're not even sure he's in town. But I think I know which one of Wormwood's associates might be able to give me that information.
If there's a guy who knows information about Wormwood, it's probably a gentleman called the Baron. The Baron happens to be having a dinner function where it looks like he is either a keynote speaker or a guest of honor in some way. Batman interrupts.
Well, I saw it. I mean, it's interesting how he just sort of breaks in, swings down, grabs the Baron, crashes through a window or something. He takes him out on the balcony.
Yeah.
It's very dramatic. And I think that's the idea. I think he's supposed to instill fear. He wants people to understand that he's unpredictable. He could show up at any moment. And if he wants you, he's going to get you.
Yeah, I agree. It is effective in that regard, but now you've got a room full of people who have seen the Batman. And I don't know if that works in his favor or against him. I think if I want to be the boogeyman, I stay out of sight as much as humanly possible, and I remain sort of that tale that you tell your kids.
Which is why I didn't choose the boogeyman. He's Batman.
All right, that's fair. I'll accept that. What I won't accept is his Wormwood-esque tactics, which is to hang the Baron by his suspenders over with a hook over Gotham City. I mean, this guy, those suspenders must be very strong because he's really counting on the Baron not plummeting to his own death. But very much like Wormwood, he is using fear tactics. He is saying you could potentially die if you don't know that Batman doesn't kill. You could potentially die if you don't give me information on Josiah Wormwood.
It's intimidation, it's coercion, it's torture. I think his methods are very similar to Wormwood, and I think it's supposed to. I don't think it's a coincidence that he's going in that direction. Of course, the Baron gives up some information, and we know he's not going to drop him, so he saves him.
Well, Batman makes it clear that the Baron needs to leave town, and next thing we know, the Baron is actually calling on Josiah Wormwood. And I think maybe the Baron might be very upset with Batman after this because he hires Josiah Wormwood to steal
the Batman's cape and cowl.
It's a very elaborate thing to try to take. But if you're going to get anything from Batman, I guess the cape and cowl is the thing you would want to get.
Right, and remember that Wormwood likes the challenge, right?
Yeah.
He's the kind of guy, he knows he's the only guy who's capable of tricking and manipulating and even torturing someone like the Batman in order to get this coveted cape and cowl. So I think he's up for the challenge. I think that it's something that he's excited to do.
Yeah, I agree. And just like as I was saying before, if your goal is to sort of wipe away the mystique of your existence, best possible way to do it, get in front of a bunch of people, or merchandising, apparently. What does the Baron show Wormwood? A large rolled-up poster of Batman in a very Dark Knight kind of pose. Like, apparently there's merchandising enough that the Baron has a poster of Batman, and it's like, I want the cape and cowl.
Why wouldn't there be posters of Batman everywhere?
You don't. I wouldn't think that you'd want to become some sort of heartthrob poster.
Well, he didn't make them. It's probably somebody.
But it's not the first time we've seen it.
Club.
If I remember so correctly, little Sherwood, little ginger kid that got picked on.
Oh yeah, Batman's in my base. I got Batman in my basement.
Yeah, he had a poster or something of Batman on his wall, if I remember correctly. And maybe posters of Joker or something as well. Somebody had a poster of Joker at one point. I remember thinking that was really weird. But so apparently all of the heroes and villains of Gotham City have their own posters.
I guess I'll take my poster of Joker down now that you think it's weird.
I'm just saying. Well, not weird for you, but weird for him to allow merchandising of
what is he going to sue people? Like,
I would.
Okay.
So anyway, Baron shows Wormwood a poster of Batman, insists that he get the cape and cowl. Wormwood takes the challenge. And the next thing we know, we are seeing the very first use of the bat signal in Batman the Animated Series.
Got a new toy, I see.
We'll have to see if Gordon continues to use the bat signal. But it seems to me that if you're going to lure the Batman away from anything that's going on, maybe the bat signal is the best possible way to do it. Just flip that on and be like, now I'm going to go commit a crime over here. I don't know. It might not have been a very good idea, come to think of it, that Gordon created the bat signal.
Well, he's the only one who can use it. You know, he has the key or the
ability to
code.
flip the switch.
Yeah.
But it is the very first use of the bat signal in Batman the Animated Series. And again, I find that kind of interesting that they've waited so many episodes before using what we've all known has existed for decades.
Right.
Where iron horses go to rot, and children toot their horns a lot, a damsel's pleas shall come to naught.
Now, what I find interesting about Batman's reaction here, and again, this is my whole, I'm not so sure Batman is very cool right now. He figures it out. He solves the riddle. But
Batman solves the riddle.
Batman solves the riddle, but won't tell Gordon what the solution is. It's like Gordon says, "Do you know what it means?"
Don't you?
And then leaves. I mean, it's kind of douchey.
Well,
if the cops need to chase this guy or get this guy, it seems kind of weird that Batman insists on doing it himself.
Well, if you want to make a parallel with Wormwood, I almost said the Riddler. If you want to make a parallel with the interrogator, he's somewhat, I think that he feels that he's superior to Gordon. I think that he feels that he has this knowledge set, this ability. And of course he knows the solution to the riddle. And he kind of puts Gordon down by saying, when you don't know this is a piece of cake.
Right.
But it solidifies that he and only he can be Batman because he's able to solve, these kinds of riddles.
But I don't think it necessarily means that he's the only one who can solve crime in Gotham City, though. I mean, I think
he thinks that. Because,
then that just helps lend credence to my concerns about Batman.
Maybe. I think it comes down to, really wanting to emphasize that he is the only one who can rid the streets of the criminals and the cowardly lot. I think that he believes he's the only one who can do that, and so it wouldn't make sense to share that knowledge or collaborate with Gordon to a great degree.
Okay. Well, the riddle ends up taking him straight to the train depot. And sure enough, there's a train. Batman hops onto it and finds himself caught in one of Wormwood's traps.
Now then, you have approximately 1 minute to save that young woman.
60 seconds start to tick by. The train is speeding toward this girl. Batman, rather than give up the cape and cowl, decides to try to get out of the train and help the girl. When just at the last second, when he gets to the girl and finally gets to save her, he finds out she's a hologram. There was no girl. Batman didn't fall for the trap. Wormwood didn't get the cape and cowl. But this is kind of messed up in my head. Batman knows he has 60 seconds to help a girl. And as if it were a magic trick where the whole thing is to get out in the last second, that woman could have been killed if she were a real woman. Had he been a second later, and yet the cape and cowl are too important to him to save this girl.
Again, it goes to his grandiose sense of self. He believes that he can save this woman, and he does. Well, he doesn't because she's a hologram, but he
would have.
He ends up getting to her before the train hits. So once again, he was right.
This grandiose sense of self, fanaticism. I think it's the need to be the Batman, and I'm not going to play your game by your rules. I'm going to save this girl, and he would have if she had existed. But Wormwood is sent, tail between his legs, unable to get the cape and cowl. He informs the Baron of this, and the Baron basically makes it clear that he really wants this and that he needs to deliver it.
Right.
No more games. Make it happen. Wormwood sets up yet another elaborate trap, this time at the Wax Museum. Now, this time, Batman actually did solve the riddle and told Commissioner Gordon about it, but kind of did it in a condescending way.
What do you think this one means?
Those famous figures? Standing around together? Delarue's Wax Museum, what else?
Oh, of course.
So, again, there's something a little off about Batman here. He's a real jerk in this episode.
But I don't see this any different as, let's say, someone just doing their job. If their job is some kind of special set of skills or some unique knowledge, So, for instance, you know that in the field that I work in, I'm a clinician, I'm a scientist practitioner. So it wouldn't make sense for me to sit down and tell somebody who's not a psychologist how to do something.
But they're both crime fighters. Both of them have a job to stop crime. And so I think that the vigilante does have a bit of a moral obligation, at the very least, well, certainly a legal obligation to tell Commissioner Gordon, the police commissioner, especially since he knows he's on his side, without this condescending tone. I don't know. Batman just seems a little edgy.
I think he's taking ownership of this because he knows that he's being targeted, he's being singled out, so he's going to handle it himself.
I'm going to go a step further and ask, do you think this is a result of the last 30 episodes that we've seen? Like, seeing the sort of torture that he's been through. He was just in a straitjacket recently. He was just last week stuck in a dream. Could this be in some way related to the fact that last week he had the perfect life and chose to give it up to be Batman?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great point. We often don't talk about the previous episodes and the narratives, the larger narrative, know, how they're strung together. Is there a common thread above and beyond the characters? And I think that's a great point. I would even go further and say, is he building some kind of resentment? Is he bitter? Is he experiencing vicarious trauma or secondary traumatic stress disorder? Or even experiencing what we call compassion fatigue, which is the result of working with people and being exposed to a lot of loss, danger, trauma. So just kind of, being, if I can say, touched by so many people who have been in unfortunate places. So he now has this worldview that, Gotham is dangerous, that people are inherently, evil, that...
Which isn't the first time that we've seen that. I mean, even with Christmas with the Joker, he refused to believe that people could be nice people. He believed that it was going to be awful, regardless of the fact that it was Christmas Eve.
Right. So all these things are possible, but I still think that at the core of this is his belief that he has a particular job, and his sense of self, his self-value comes from that. So I feel I really align with him. I don't fault him for wanting to take ownership of this. I'm going to go from here on out with the belief that last week's episode screwed him up a little bit, in that he's basically saying, look, I had it all, I gave it up in order to be Batman. So you know what? I'm Batman. Yeah, and, let me be Batman. Let me be Batman. Let me go solve this case. I think he might need this. I think he might. He might need it to bounce back a little bit. He goes to the Wax Museum, and he's caught in yet another trap. This time, there is a 20,000 watt halogen bulb above him, and it's going to melt him at some point in time because it melts wax. It's hot enough to melt wax, and eventually, I guess it would be hot enough to melt the human being. That's what the interrogator tells him. Right. Batman ends up shattering the lamp after a couple of tries, but Wormwood is on top of this. The lamp then releases a very toxic nerve gas. Batman has no choice but to give up his cape and cowl. This is the second time
in 1 week, Drea, that Batman has had a second mask of some kind. In the previous episode that we just did, Assault on Arkham, without giving away any kind of spoilers, there is a point in time where we realize that Batman apparently carries around a second cowl.
Yeah.
Batman gives up the cape and cowl, but he's wearing sort of a makeshift bandana over the head, eyes cut out. You know, it's very sort of Mask of Zorro.
A second mask? Not as confident as we'd seem then, are we?
Yeah, I think he has to take precautions because he knows now that his cape and cowl will be requested. So
right.
He is just, he's just covering
now,
space.
Okay, but here's a question for you. Is this a case of I am simply prepared in case I have to give up my cape and cowl? Or is there a little doubt here? Because if you are firmly aware of the fact that there is no chance that you will lose, or there is no chance that you will give up the cape and cowl, why bring a second mask? Seems like a little bit of self-doubt there to me. Maybe a little bit.
He's trying to preserve his identity.
Okay.
Do what you got to do.
You do what you have to do. So he gives up his cape and cowl to Wormwood and ends up, having this huge fight. He ends up giving up his cape and cowl to Wormwood. Wormwood escapes with it, delivers it to the Baron. And the Baron can't shake the need to know where Wormwood hid the bearer bonds. But that's okay because Wormwood cannot shake the need to know why the Baron really, really wants the cape and cowl. So they decide to trade the information. Wormwood gives the Baron the information he needs about the drop-off that's going to happen tomorrow with the bearer bonds. And then the Baron informs him that he's going to wear the cape and cowl because guess what? He's not the Baron, he's Batman! What? Mind blown! He's Batman! The Baron apparently really did leave town. And Batman has been squatting in his office ever since, just waiting for this opportunity to hire Wormwood. And this, Drea, is where Batman comes crashing down for me. Because here's an opportunity to take a look at this episode again.
Yeah.
With clearer eyes. 20/20 hindsight. Batman has known from the beginning that Wormwood would want his cape and cowl because he's the one who hired him.
Right.
A, why the cape and cowl? Like, why?
Oh, it's a challenge.
Okay, all right. I'll give you that. B, why save the girl in the first challenge when he could have just ended everything by giving up the cape and cowl the first time?
Because it's a challenge.
Why go through multiple? You don't need. He had him. He would have had him just as easily.
Well, now, but just like retrieving the cape and cowl from the Batman is a challenge for the interrogator.
Yeah.
Being given 60 seconds to save this woman's life, she's tied to the track. I mean, that's a challenge for the Batman.
That's like putting a laser in front of a cat and being, and the cat trying not to be interested in it. I think that might be a little. I think Batman might have a problem.
He also has to play the part. Now, remember, the interrogator doesn't know that Batman is actually the one who set him up to this.
But the part is irrelevant if Wormwood is going to take the cape and cowl back to the Baron, and then the Baron is just going to reveal himself as Batman again. He could have done it 15 minutes earlier. At least 10 minutes earlier. I mean, I get that the show has to be 22 minutes to make up a half hour, but at some point in time, if you're going to look at this realistically, Batman didn't need to put that girl in jeopardy. Batman didn't need to save her in the last minute, only to find out she was a hologram. Batman didn't need to potentially put other people in jeopardy because he didn't know when Wormwood was going to try again.
Right.
All of this could have been taken care of right there at that train depot, and yet Batman chose to keep it going. And it seems a little odd to me. But the two of them get into this big fight. Wormwood then tries to rush Batman, flies out through a window. And luckily enough, Batman had the cape because Wormwood was saved by grabbing on to Batman's cape. Mm-hmm. Oh, the irony. Wormwood is obviously imprisoned. Batman obviously retrieves the bearer bonds with Gordon. Everybody is happy. Well, I guess except for Wormwood, who's in prison. Especially since...
When we collared the carrying agent at the airport, he sang like a bird. And he fingered you as the guy who was going to sell him the bonds. Oh, almost forgot. This came for you.
Confinement will speed your reform, but long cold nights will be the norm. So here is a thing to keep you warm.
Batman has given Wormwood his cape and cowl. Again, Drea. What is going on?
Well, it's not his cape and cowl. It's a throwaway version.
What?
It's not his official.
How do you know that?
Because he would never give his secrets away. That's a special cape and cowl. His own, the one he uses, is a special cape and cowl.
You think he only has one? We saw him.
He has several versions, but that version, the one that he uses, is a special version. The one he gave to...
It's like a generic... This is the merchandising thing. This is the...
He bought it at Target.
Hey, I got some capes and cowls. I'm just going to give one to Wormwood. Okay, now...
Wait, but now you've just pointed out that now that we know that the Batman was the Baron, Batman had to find a poster of himself.
Yeah. Yes. Batman had to either find it or commission it or something. Like, Batman... It's weird. It's especially weird that he gave Wormwood the cape and cowl for a couple of reasons. One, he is now psychologically torturing Wormwood.
Yeah.
Is that something that the Batman that we've known for the last 30 episodes would do?
Maybe. I mean, I think this is, at this point, it's an ego game. We know that we're dealing with two personalities of people who think that they're the best at what they do, and they're trying to outsmart each other. And it's the final. And Batman is really big on the final laugh.
Yeah.
Even more so than the Joker is. Like he really likes to have the final
little jab
rub.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and so that was his way of doing that. And again, I don't think he's giving away secrets. I don't think that that's the actual cape and cowl he uses.
No, but you know what it is doing? If Wormwood gets out of prison, because theoretically for the job, for the crime he committed, he wouldn't be there for life. He would still get out. He now has a cape and cowl of Batman's, whether it's genuine or not. No one knows that except Bruce Wayne.
Right.
No one has gotten up close to authenticate. Is that a genuine cape and cowl? Wormwood could now do anything with this cape and cowl.
I think it came with a certificate of
authenticity. Right. Well, at some point in time, there needs to be a watermark or something on that cape and cowl, because I have a feeling this guy's going to go off and use it for things later. He's going to...
But again, this is part of Batman's ego. Anybody could put on the cape and cowl. Nobody could be Batman.
Let me get this straight. As a psychologist, this is a good thing for you? Like you were saying that he's justified in feeling this way or acting this way? Because he seems like a jerk to me.
Oh, based on the experiences that he's had on his... I think he's justified in his confidence about his expertise and about what he knows, his skill level. He's convinced he is the only one who can do what he's doing, and I am also convinced that he's the only one. So it is justified in that it's somewhat, I think there's evidence for those beliefs. This isn't a delusion, right? He's not in some psychotic episode. This isn't a break from reality. I think that he's basing his ego off of something that's actually very true.
That's fair. That's fair. We'll have to see if his personality disorder gets any better or worse over the course of the next few episodes. But I am keeping an eye on it, knowing what we know and this little link that we made to last week's episode. Whether it was intentional or not, we have to treat it as if this is part of Batman's evolution. And I find it to be interesting. I don't dislike this episode the way that I saw a bunch of people online saying that they didn't like it. I think it says a whole lot about Batman. And actually, I want you listeners to let us know if you agree. Drop us comments, send us tweets at Arkham Sessions, send us email, arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Let us know what you think, because this is actually a pretty big deal, and I think it's something that we'll end up carrying with us throughout the remainder of this podcast.
I think if anything is to be gained from this episode, it's that the poor man's Riddler, and now this makes more sense. The poor man's Riddler is telling us a lot about Batman's ego strength and his level of confidence and his beliefs, in what he does.
Just imagine what regular man's
and
Riddler.
Maybe that's the point. Maybe we don't want to draw attention to one of the supervillains from the Rogues Gallery, because we want to really put the spotlight, if you will, on Batman.
The bat signal on Batman. I guess that doesn't really work all that. That doesn't really work all that well. I failed at that one. I'm sorry. Next week is going to be an amazing episode. I'm very excited about this one. It's actually, we're going to deal with a two-parter. It is Tony Zuko coming in, and we get to see Robin's Reckoning parts 1 and 2. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is a really amazing episode. I'm very excited about it. Part 1 actually won the 1993 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program. So I am very excited to get into it and find out why. Robin's Reckoning, parts 1 and 2, next week with Tony Zuko.
I don't do freaky deaky.
You will next week, that's for sure. Drea, where can people find you online?
I'm at Arkham Asylum Doc on Twitter. My website is underthemaskonline.com. That's where you can find all of my articles, the psychology of superheroes, cosplay, all sorts of things. Our podcast is there as well. And there's a contact me button, and you can contact me.
That's right. You can find me on Twitter. I am at bward028. That's pretty much the only place I hang out. So come find me there. I'm friendly. I talk to people. So come interact with us. You can also find us, like I said, on Twitter together as at Arkham Sessions.
If you have questions about Robin's Reckoning, or even comments about where you think that's going psychologically, let us know.
Yeah, because we definitely want to address it in next week's episode. But you should act quickly, because I will say that we normally record these episodes over the course of the weekend, and you will be able to hear that episode on Comics Alliance earlier in the week. Usually they get it a couple of days early. So if you can't wait, go visit comicsalliance.com on the day that it's released, and then download on iTunes. Let us know what you think. Until then, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.